So welcome to an afternoon interview, and do you want to start first?
Oh yeah, so Debbie made me tell all of you that they mispronounced my name in the recorded. It's actually Julia Whelan. So, and I was like, of course, it would be the audio part of the festival that got screwed up, and it's me, so go ahead.
So in the book narrating interview, we already made a mistake.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to tell a little bit about you before we got started. You're an actor. You started acting at age 11. You were Grace Manning on Once and Again. You were in Lifetime movies. You're a screenwriter. You're an award-winning narrator, narrated over 500 books, written 2 books of her own, My Oxford Year and Thank You for Listening, her latest book. But maybe the most important thing is she studied in Oxford for a year, and she came back certified as a tea master. Now I told her I was going to surprise her, and I was going to bring some nice cups, and I was going to, have some tea for us. I think she decided that wasn't a good thing because, maybe the tea I brought wouldn't be up to the quality of what you would want.
I need to pre-approve those things. That's not.
So I wanted to start really in the beginning and
Yeah.
kind of your upbringing, and again, you were an actor, and kind of tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I always loved the idea of acting. I was a very this is so weird to talk about myself and like that. I was when I was a child, I was very creative, and I was also an only child. I just heard Billy Collins do a poem about being an only child, and I think there's certain similarities. I was constantly entertaining myself by writing stories and performing them, and so this was something that started very early for me. I got into acting, as my mother tells the story, because it was either that or soccer, and my parents did not like the idea of team sports. So I got into acting and very quickly fell in love with it, and but had a storytelling impulse that I think could have gone and has gone one of 2 ways, either acting or writing. And it started with acting because that was the thing it was the most accessible to me. And I grew up in Oregon and started coming down to Los Angeles as a child to audition, and ended up on Once and Again, which was an incredible show that no one can watch now because it is streaming nowhere. But you can find episodes on YouTube. And it was by Ed Zwick and Marshall Herskovitz, the guys that did 30-something and My So-Called Life, and it was just always punching above its weight. And then I had kind of reached the end of my ability to enjoy Hollywood. I wanted a break. I went to college, and I think that catches us up too. Okay,
Yeah.
All right.
So I thought it was interesting. At a dinner last night, I sat at a table with Julia and with Andrew McCarthy, and she pulled out a picture on her phone. It's amazing. I mean, you think about it, we used to have albums at home with thousands and thousands of pictures in it. She pulls out a picture on her phone of her and Andrew McCarthy in a Lifetime movie.
Indeed.
It was
Indeed.
pretty amazing.
Yes.
So in one of the interviews I saw of you, you said, quote, I see the world as an actor. Do you remember that?
Nope.
Do you see the world as an actor?
Sure.
And what do you mean by that?
I don't know what I meant by it.
It was a good follow-up, right?
I
did okay.
I appreciate that. I think what I probably meant by that was I see the world as someone who is always looking to understand the characters within it. And I was just having this conversation with someone that the first kind of rule of being an actor is to not judge the characters that you're playing, and to just try to understand them. And I think that is probably what I meant when I said that. So
bring us up to then, how did you become involved in or get acquainted with narrating books?
Yeah, so I went to Middlebury College in Vermont, and I had spent a year as well at Oxford. And a good friend of mine from college, her mother was a audiobook producer and director. And at my college graduation, when I thought, okay, I took 4 years off from acting, I'm going to go back to Los Angeles and get my old job back and immediately get on another television show. They've been waiting for me, clearly. But at my college graduation, Laura Grafton, this wonderful, wonderful woman, came up to me and she said, I feel like with your acting background and your freshly minted creative writing degree, you might be very good at audiobook narration. And I had never listened to an audiobook. I didn't even know what they were. And I don't want to say rudely, but I was sort of like, oh, okay, that's nice. I'll circle back to you if I'm interested in that. I'm going to go, get back on TV. And when I came back to Los Angeles and the industry had changed, this was 2008, and everything had sort of changed. Like HBO was a thing now, and Breaking Bad was on the air, and there was all of these movie stars were doing TV, and they were taking my job. And I, within about a year of tutoring and trying to make ends meet, called her and I said, so wait, what is this? I read books into a microphone and you pay me? Is that how this works? And I sent her a demo, and it happened to coincide with this moment in publishing where young adult novels were suddenly everywhere, and they needed the voices to record these books because most audiobook narrators at that point had been doing it for 20, 30 years, and they were not believable, 15-year-old vampires. And so that was kind of my entrance into the field.
Do you remember the first book?
I do. I had two books. I went out to Michigan to record them. That's where the studios are at that time. And one was called Need by Carrie Jones, and the other was called Peace, Love, and Baby Ducks by Lauren Myracle. And they were both great and very different, and I fell in love instantly.
So what I'd like to do is have you read the first page of your book, Thank You for Listening. The reason I picked the first page is because from the very first page, I loved the book. And you did. You had me from the very first page. So it's a great book. They sell it over in the bookstore. Please go and buy it, and her other book too. But if you could and did you narrate your own books?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have practice.
No one else was gonna, I was not gonna let that happen. Okay. Where did you want me to stop again? Remind me.
Start here.
Yeah.
And stop right there.
Okay. We can do that. Oh, yeah. Okay. I see. All right. I forgot about this book. All right. Things were heating up with no possibility of cooling down. Not this time. She could see it in his eyes. His pupils were throbbing. The gentleman of the last 3 weeks was gone. He was now anything but gentle. He was all man. Their eyes were locked and loaded. He raised his hand and flattened it against her white silk blouse. Her heartbeat grabbed at it. He kissed her hotly, wetly, then took hold of her straddled hips and lifted her off him. She gave a startled cry as he flipped her something to drink onto her back on his expensive crepe-de-chine couch. Ma'am, we shouldn't be doing this, he growled. You're my intern, and grandfather insists I marry Caroline. Something to drink? The long-suffering tone broke through, and Swanee Chester, startled window seat occupant, whipped off her noise-canceling headphones as if they were on fire. What? Sorry, what? Something to drink? Just water, please. Ice? Just, please. She dropped her tray, and the flight attendant passed her the water. Before Swanee could thank her, the woman on the aisle turned to her daughter in the middle seat and asked, in the squeaky, love-dripping voice used interchangeably for pets and children, anything to drink? Juice! What kind of juice? Swanee slipped her headphones back on and realized she hadn't stopped the audiobook. The blouse was off now. She sighed, paused it, connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi, and texted Mark.
So the first question I have after you read that is, do you have a reading voice, a narrator's reading voice, different from your regular voice talking to us?
Yes, yeah. I think so. Yes, I do. People are often surprised by this, and then I always think, well, do you carry your work home with you? I have but when I say this, I mean this. My narration voice feels as genuine and authentic to me as my regular voice. I spend so much time in it, and I communicate so thoroughly with it that it feels second nature to me. But I don't walk around being
a narrator.
Yeah.
So then tell us about the process you go through from when you first receive a book, what you do, up till you start narrating? And your studio now is not in Michigan, it's in your house, right?
Yeah, so yes. So an interesting thing happened over the last, I started about 15 years ago, and the industry was still pretty much, you would go into studios to record. And then in 2012, there was a big change in the industry where I think that was actually when Amazon acquired Audible, and there was suddenly so much work to be done. And the studios were just fairly bursting. We were doing 24-hour shifts at these studios, sleeping on couches. And a lot of professional narrators who could make their living doing it decided to create home studios to just be able to handle the workload. So that's when that started. So what happens is a publisher reaches out to me and they say, we have a book that we'd like you to do. Here are the dates we would like it by. Does that work? And I then, if I take the book on, I read the manuscript and I create, my prep read is basically a research project. I'm creating a list of characters that are in the book and any accents or vocal descriptions that the author gives them. And then I'm creating a word list of any words that I don't know how to pronounce. And sometimes they're real words, but sometimes they're author invention. Like if I'm doing a fantasy and there's a character with like 13 vowels and 2 apostrophes in their name. And I send those questions, if I have them, off to the producer or the author and get the answers back. And then I start building my strategy for how I'm going to perform it. So by the time I get in the booth, it's already been kind of locked in and the research is done and I'm ready to go.
Do you interact with the author?
Often, yes. This has also changed in the industry a little bit. I think as authors have learned they need to care more about audio because at the beginning they didn't really. And so now that they realize it's an increasing amount of their sales and they are, the quality matters to them and they want someone who's going to do a good job, I have created very strong relationships with a number of the authors that I record for because I'm fostering their baby. It's a very intimate, it's a position of trust.
So even in this first page, I mean, you had to do different voices. It sounded like a child, another woman, maybe a male. How do you decide what voice to give to those characters?
I think I will always take into account the tone of the book. So this is a rom-com. I'm going to go a little bigger with this than I would normally.
Meaning?
A romantic comedy. So I will have more fun with that and be a little broader than I would if, say, it's historical fiction or something a little bit more somber. Memoir, I very rarely do characterizations. So yeah, it depends. It depends on just the voice of the piece. This is where I think being a writer myself makes me very sensitive to how something was written, the intentionality of it, what the author is trying to say, and I want to stay in the lane that the author has created.
And does the author sometimes tell you, look, I just want it in one voice. I don't want you to have to try to be a male voice or have an accent or be an older woman?
Let's see. Usually they're like whatever you want to do. I just had a conversation I did a short story for Caroline Kepnes, who wrote You, and she's actually a friend, and this short story came up, and she had a good idea about how to tackle it because it was written in second person, so she didn't want full characterizations for the other characters. Her take was, I think maybe you should do this the way when we tell a story about something that happened to us and we imitate the way our mom sounds or our husband sounds, so that you kind of have that, you can tell it's a different person, but it's not a fully realized character. And that was fun. That was something different.
So how do you keep, if there's multiple accents and different characters, how do you keep track of that? Okay.
No. It's mostly true, but I also will clip when I'm recording and when I feel like I've really locked in a character's voice, I will clip the audio and save it in a separate file. Because if a character disappears for 100 pages and then comes back, I like to be able to reference it. Or if you're doing a series and I've got, a year later, I've got to remember what that character was. I've got to, there's a fantasy series I do that we're going to be doing book 5, and I think there's 300 characters, and so my folder for that is just It's like sword carrier number 3. I'm like clipping him because he could come back as a main character in the last book.
And do you just go into your booth at home and start at the beginning and read till you finish?
Yeah.
All in one setting?
Well, I mean, I eat, I sleep. I mostly eat. That's really the thing. My stomach growling sabotages me all the time. Yes, I sit down and I read the book, and I will limit myself to about 2 finished hours a day, and that equates to about 4 hours in the booth. And it's just better for my voice if I don't push past that. So I think I did thank you for listening, and I want to say about 5 days.
Okay. And some of the books I listen to now, they do dual narrations. They have multiple people.
Yeah.
Do you do that too?
So I just did that for my next book. I did as a duet, meaning that it sounds more like a radio play. So it's characters, different actors talking to each other, switching dialogue back and forth.
And do you do that together in the same booth, or can you do it with Zoom
So
almost across
we did
country?
it over Zoom because I was working with other professional narrators. We all had our home studios, so we had a live open Zoom link going so we could see each other and hear each other, but we were all recording on our separate rigs. There's certain situations, I've done duets before which I don't recommend, but this is where you just sort of read the line, your line, give it a pause, read the next line, and it just goes again, and then an editor cuts it all together with the different actors, and it just goes against like the most basic principle of acting, which is listen and respond. You're not hearing anything, you're just saying lines into a vacuum. That's not preferable, but they do them that way.
So did your training as an actor influence you as to how you narrate a book?
Yes, I have very extensive vocal training. I have, I think part of it is like as a kid, especially at that time, there was when I got into it, I've had my SAG card since I was 9, and when I was getting into it, it was like it was the year of the 12-year-old girl. Like I was auditioning probably 4 times a week, and you just get into that rhythm of like, okay, I'm playing like the horse girl for this audition, and then I'm playing the girl from the wrong side of the tracks for this audition, and you're just kind of like putting on different hats. And I think that ended up being incredibly helpful for audiobook narration, where you are playing a cast of, whatever's in the book, I'm doing it. And also characters I would never play on camera. Like I'm not going in for like a Jamaican grandfather, except in audiobooks. And so, it's fun if you're an actor like that.
So, just like I did now, when most of us talk, we may use our hands, or
Yes.
you may have expressions, or
Yeah.
your eyes may say something. So I'm interested, because I'm a judge, and so when we swear in a jury and we give them jury instructions, we tell them how to judge the credibility of somebody. Watch their face, watch their answer, watch their demeanor, all those types of things. So how do you not, and we hesitate, we stammer sometimes when we talk. How do you deal with that?
I think that was actually the biggest change from going from on camera, where you can use your physicality. I remember the first time I went on I'd been doing audiobooks for a long time, and I finally had an on-camera audition again that kind of came up like last minute. And I remember getting ready, and my husband, who's also an acting coach, looked at me and he was like, "You can move. Like, you have a whole body to use. You could move." And I was so used to staying as still as possible. You can't move. You find out doing this job, you find out the noises your body makes. You find out that your wrist clicks, and you just try to stay as still as possible. And the other thing is that I would listen back. The first few years I was doing this was I would listen back to my own stuff and learn what didn't translate. Like, you're used to it on camera, you can say something very dryly because you can take a long blink when you're doing it, and like sarcasm can be conveyed. And I would listen back and I was like, nope, that just sounded monotone. I got nothing from that. So you learn, when you can't use your face and you can't use your body, how you translate that into your voice.
So when you finish narrating the book, get to the last page, then what happens next?
So it doesn't matter. I consolidate and I export the files, and then I upload the files to an editor who is from the publishing company, who then listens to the files and sends me back all of the mistakes that I was sure I did not make while I was recording. And I fix those. I do corrections. Like the other day, I had one that instead of saying uterus, I said universe, which is poetic, but wrong. But wrong. And because you just don't hear yourself after a certain point. And then they drop in all of the corrections and they make it pretty. And then it goes off, usually, hopefully, to a final round of QC, a proofer who listens through one more time while reading the book, and yet somehow still mistakes happen. But at that point, the files are ready and they are distributed, and that's how a bill becomes a law.
So I heard another YouTube video, and you have another sentence I'm going to give to you. So if you don't remember it, make
Okay.
something up.
Okay, sure.
You said you stand in for the reader. You remember that?
Nope, but I'm not. I wouldn't disagree with myself. I do. I think the job of this job is to be. I mean, you're doing both. You're being the author in one respect, but I want to bring as much freshness or awe to it as a reader would have upon first brush with the piece. So I really feel like I'm bridging between the writer and the reader.
So I want to ask you about your book that you narrated, the one, Thank You for Listening. Was that hard to narrate your own book that you wrote? And I guess where I'm leading to is, did you get to some paragraphs and say, oh no, I want to change that?
Okay, so yeah. With this one was absolute hell. And the reason is I was a first-time debut novelist. I had massive imposter syndrome. And I could not...
What do you mean by that?
I was like, why are they letting me publish a book?
Oh, okay.
And I also, this is objectively a very difficult book to perform. It's first-person present, so like the emotions are very on the surface. Everything the character is feeling is immediate, and it needs to be addressed immediately, and everything is just very on the surface. Plus, it's about an American girl in Oxford, and so she's the only American in a cast of Brits. And so it would have been difficult even if I hadn't written it, but I was also reading it going, who wrote this? And wanting to change, like still edit as much as I possibly could. And so this was not fun. I'm very proud of it, and it won awards, but it was not fun. I learned my lesson with this, though, that when Thank You for Listening happened, I read it aloud at every point in the editorial process, so that I was so familiar with that book inside and out. And it's not like I made decisions about performance, or I knew exactly what I was going to do with characters, but I just had edited it so much that it felt clean to me. And then getting into it was a joy. So I enjoyed that one a lot.
So I want to ask you about a couple other books that you narrated. The first is Educated by Tara Westover. I think probably everyone in this room has read it.
Yeah.
It's a difficult book. It's a difficult subject.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable, and when you read it, you become uncomfortable. So as the narrator, as you're trying to narrate it, how do you guard against that? How do you guard against showing in your voice some opinion about what may be happening? Or what do you do to try to just communicate, in a sense, what the author wants?
So in that situation, I knew when I got the book that we had a very, very special book on our hands. And sometimes the publisher doesn't give you a heads up about that. Like, this didn't come with any special, this is going to be our front list title. There was none of that. It was just sort of, we have a memoir, which is usually an author would do it. And in this situation, I think, from what I understand, Tara thought she wanted to do it and then said, actually, I don't know that I want to read this aloud, which, as someone who has directed a lot of authors in reading their books, I think she was smart to do that, and I think that people underestimate how vulnerable it can be to be reading your memoir specifically out loud. It can be re-traumatizing. So in this situation, I felt that my job was to, again, the author, she set the lane, she set the tone of that story, and she is not bitter. She is not angry. She's not outraged anymore. She's done the work, and she was presenting these, objectively horrific situations with so much understanding and grace that it was my job to convey that, even though as a reader, it was, horrifying and anger-provoking, but I didn't want to let any of that show because she didn't let any of that show.
So the next book is Gone Girl.
Yeah.
By Gillian Flynn.
Yeah.
Difficult, psychopath, extremely unlikable character.
Is she, though?
So
I think see, this is what I mean by the don't judge them thing. I think she's amazing. Amazing Amy.
So how do you communicate that? It's a totally different character.
Psychopaths are the best. Any actor will tell you, the psychopaths are the best to play. It's so much fun. This is still, to this day, the best 2 days I've ever had in the booth was that book. Yeah, no, I had nothing was complicated about that. Everything was on the page. Gillian's brilliant. Everything was fun. I had so much fun. I just kept looking up, because that one was directed. I went into studio for that one. It was long enough ago. And I remember looking up at the director being too far?
But
no?
tell me what that means when you say you went into a studio and it was directed.
Okay, so Penguin Random House actually has studios in Los Angeles. And I, at that time, went in to record that. So I was in their studios with a director who... because that is co-narrated with Kirby Hayborn, and so we both were in. We weren't in at the same time, but there was a director there to make sure everything was consistent, pronunciations were consistent, we were sort of doing the same thing. And so she was just there to tell me, at a certain point I was like, can I do an evil laugh? Or no, we're not doing laugh? Okay. But yeah.
But at home, you don't have a director or a producer there.
Not typically. Typically I'm recording by myself, and
can you kind of describe the booth, what it looks like? And
it's not for the faint of heart. It's 4x4, little panic room. We were just talking about this summer. I was saying that now they're very pretty. You can get very pretty booths, but I have a very primitive, double-walled, behemoth, industrial carpeted booth that it's just such an eyesore, but I'm so superstitious about the sound quality that I won't change it. So
you told a story last night that when you haven't recorded for a number of days and you go out and you drive around, the first thing that you do when you get in the booth and shut the door is?
I reach for a seatbelt because I'm just I came in, I sat down into something, I closed a door.
So your profession depends on your voice.
Yeah, that's why if you see me walking around with a mask, that's why. Yeah, so I got to record next week.
What else do you do to protect it?
Hydrate. Especially being out here in the desert. I do about 3 to 4 full mason jars a day. A lot of tea. I, don't drink excessively. The days before I record, I'm not smoking. I don't put myself in situations where I need to be loud, at, parties or something.
Have you had times when a week comes up and you're supposed to do a book and you can't?
Oh yeah, that was pre-pandemic. I have an only child immune system. I get sick very, very quickly, and almost someone just looks at me funny, and I'm like, oh yeah, I feel that. And so I was every time I would fly, I would get sick, and as a narrator, people are used to that. That's part of if you're going to be dealing with humans, you have to be you have to be agile with that sort of stuff. But what we would end up doing, and every narrator talks about this, is, the way books are scheduled, it's like there's a certain window where you've got to record. You can't push it too far. The book has a publication date and it's coming out. And so often what ends up happening is people get sick, they get better, they try to get better fast, they get in the booth. I've done this before, and then I've tried to make up for lost time and end up losing my voice completely. And then everything falls apart. So that's why I'm just, at this point, very protective of trying not to get sick in the first place. But,
So, there's the Oscars and the Academy Awards and the Grammys and all that. Are there awards for book narration?
There are the Audio Awards, which actually last night I was noticing on your kind of statistics of the writers you have here at the festival. I saw there were 3 Audio Award winners, which were not all me, but for books that apparently won the Audies. Our Oscars of audiobooks.
And what kind? Did they have a ceremony?
We have a ceremony. Yeah, there's a ceremony every year. It's usually in New York. It's actually going to be in LA this year. I refer to it as Brigadoon because it's like the one night a year we all get together and the community just sort of appears, and then everyone goes back to their respective booths. But it's a lot of fun. It's fun.
So do you have authors that you work with regularly? Is that a contract you have, or it's just a friendship that's developed? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not a contract because technically they can't contract me in their contracts because I'm an independent contractor. So they can't, force me into work that I have no part of. But at this point, I have a number of authors who, unless they write a book that's just not for my voice, I'm going to do. And that's happened over a number of years. Emily Henry comes to mind, wonderful, wonderful rom-com writer. Kristin Hannah, whose book comes out on Tuesday, The Women. And then Taylor Jenkins Reid is another writer who I started out doing her early titles, and in fact there were 2 that I hadn't done, and just last year we went back and recorded the 2 that I hadn't done. So now I've had at least a part in all of hers.
And you don't just do books, fiction or nonfiction, you also do journals through something called Autumn, which I learned about. Tell us what that is.
Yes, okay, so Autumn that hurts. Autumn was an app that put long-form journalism on audio, and started back in 2017, I believe. And I've narrated for them since 2018. I was actually head of production there in 2018, 2019, and it was just a wonderful service where you could get. It was for $9 a month, we had 25 different publications: The Atlantic, The New Yorker, now I'm blanking, what else? New York Mag, and then some fun stuff like Bitter Southerner, or New York Review of Books, or London Review of Books. And it was just the best of journalism read to you by professional narrators. And it was acquired by the New York Times, and just this last June, it got folded into the new Times audio app. So I still record. I do New York Times Magazine pieces, some New York Times reported pieces, plus the occasional New Yorker piece. But
and is it different than narrating a book?
Yes. So there's no characterization. There's no performance. In that case, I really am standing in for the writer. So my background I grew up in a political family, and I sort of...
Ladies and gentlemen.
Whoa.
Really?
Maybe they re-recorded your name. They were going to get it right.
Maybe they did. Why don't you just let me re-record it?
We should have had you do them all.
This. I'll do them all. Seriously, next year, just let me. I'll do them all. What was I saying? Doesn't matter. What was I saying?
We're talking about
Autumn,
and if you do a different voice.
No. In this situation, I have a very a wry journalist voice, maybe.
Can you give us an example? You want to read any book?
Sure. That's going to be fiction. Wait, that's
Okay.
Unbroken. Here's Jamie Oliver.
A cookbook.
Jamie Oliver's Food Revolution. I don't know how to do this, Riley. Oh God, this is gonna be hilarious. Whoops. Okay. I'm gonna do this in like this is how I would do a Jane Mayer piece or something. Or Rebecca Traister or something. So the text is not gonna match the tone at all, but here we go. Carefully cut into your avocado until you hit the pit, then run the knife around it to halve it. Gently twist the two halves and pull them apart. Carefully remove the pit and discard, then peel the skin off and discard that too. Cut the cress or alfalfa. Put a handful or two of flour into a bowl. Drop your shrimp into the bowl of flour and toss until they're completely coated. It's you just have to have that tone of "you idiot" as you're doing it. That's the.
So
the
I guess I have
presumption.
to ask then, have you done cookbooks?
Not yet.
Maybe someone will see this.
Maybe.
So can I get you to read something else?
Sure. It's very weird not to, doing it into a lavalier is interesting. I'm not going to let it affect me, though.
Okay, you go from where
professional.
you want to.
Oh, okay. So I have to set this one up. So this is the scene that I would do at readings, because this book is about audiobook narrators. It is about two audiobook narrators who fall in love while recording a romance novel, but they don't know who the other person is because they're recording under aliases, which is something that we do a lot in romance.
They're not together in the same
They're not
booth.
together in the same booth, except the moment when they do get together to record the sex scene. So if anyone is going to clutch pearls.
And one's the female and one's
Yes.
the male.
So the thing that I like to do, why I like to read this scene, other than I think it's funny, is there's two characters. There is a woman, the narrator, Swanee, who is recording the female part in this scene. There is a man, Nick, who is Irish, who records. He's like the biggest romance narrator out there, and he has this very alpha hero kind of voice in an American accent. So when I'm switching from American, he's in his narrator voice, and when he's Irish, it's just him being Nick. So it's these two recording. Okay. And they're recording in Venice. So there's the engineer that pops his head in occasionally is Italian. I'm sorry. She read a paragraph while Cosmo made his adjustments at the board and then said into her headphones, "Is good." "Great, thanks," Swanee murmured. "Si, rolling." He trilled the R again, and she smiled. She glanced up, hoping to catch Nick's eye before he began, hoping for a moment of connection, but he started reading. "Aren't you going to say something?" Swanee read her line. "I think we've done enough talking." Nick continued. The tightness in her voice stopped me. I went down to my knees in front of her. I plucked her fingers up, which had been nervously toying with the bedspread, and held them. I ran a finger lightly over her hand. Swanee said, "I want you to touch me," she finally said. Nick, in his own voice, said, "No, hang on, I need to say the dialogue tags." "Right, sorry," Swanee said. "Gotta get used to this. Cosmo, can we punch in right before my line, 'I want you to touch me'?" "Si, rolling." They heard, "I ran a finger lightly over her hand" in their headphones, and then Swanee said, "I want you to touch me," and then Nick said, she finally said. "Where?" I asked, and they were back on track. "Wherever you want." I tisked at her. Nick paused again. "Should I tisk?" Swanee considered this, glad he was engaging her. "Have you ever done it and made it sound good?" "No, never. It pops on mic." Even me saying tisk popped on mic. Yeah, or sounds like static, right? So weird. I'll keep it the way it is." Audio nerd moment over. Nick signaled Cosmo and asked him to come in after I tisked at her. "Si, rolling." Nick picked up his cue. "Where would you like me to start?" I asked. "Here?" I tapped her knee with the hand that wasn't already flipping in. I tapped her knee with the hand that wasn't already engaged with her fingers. She shook her head. "Maybe higher?" I removed my hand from her knee and placed it on her cheek. I slid my fingers under her chin and gently raised her head so we looked each other in the eye. "High enough," I said with a whisper of a smile. Swanee murmured back with the faintest sensual giggle. "Maybe lower," she murmured with a sensual giggle. I said, that'll do.
So I have to tell you, because, we met one time and we had lunch with Jamie.
Yeah.
I called you on the phone. We met last night, but I've never observed you, reading from your book or any other book. But if they ever make this into a movie,
Yeah.
you should play the part. So no, you should. So again, I want to ask you, in the booth, you used your hands and your face.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you do that too, or you've just decided you don't need to do that, so you don't? Or does it make your words more communicative?
I mean, no, when I'm I am a little bit bigger when I'm performing, and I'm also, I would usually have a mic, right here that I can get right up in and play with, so no. But the book that they're recording, the thing that they are recording, is the next thing that I wrote.
So
sorry.
Yeah, so I want to set it up.
Sorry, Your Honor,
I
go
want to
ahead.
set it up. I am the judge.
Yep, no, I know. Go ahead.
So, how do you get paid?
I get paid, audiobook narrators get paid by the finished hour. So how long a book ends up being, not how long it takes to record, not how long it takes to prep, nothing. And then we also don't get royalties for the books that we record. It's not great.
If a book sells 10,000 copies, or
doesn't
like
matter.
Educated or Gone
Yeah,
Girl,
doesn't
which
matter.
sells millions, you get a flat fee.
Yes.
Okay. And is there a union?
There is a union, and over the last 10 years, we've fought to make audiobooks part of SAG-AFTRA. So we do get pension and health contributions on our flat session fees.
Okay, good. Now, so we're where you were a few minutes ago, but this book is about narrating Casanova.
Yes.
So tell us about Casanova.
Okay, the book within a book is called Casanova LLC. It is, as I said, a romance novel. It is actually, when I was writing this book and I had to come up with what book they were going to be recording in the book, I just set myself the task of coming up with the most ridiculous romance novel premise I could think of. And that was, because it's a rom-com, it didn't need to be sexy, it just needed to be funny. It was a second chance romance with a gigolo descended from Casanova. And so it was so absurd, though, that it kind of grew on me. And I started finding that there was just way more to the story than I thought there was going to be, and it wouldn't let me go. So I decided to write that ridiculous romance novel.
And tell us about Audio Brary.
Okay, so while I was writing Casanova LLC, I also started getting increasingly upset about the way that narrators are compensated in the industry, and also seeing on the writer side of things that things can also work better for authors. And so I created my own audio publishing company and distribution channel that will allow me to acquire properties that are good for audio and pay narrators a royalty in them, and also distribute projects that can start paying narrators royalties. And this is coincidentally, when I was writing Casanova and wanted to do it as an audio series, there wasn't really a good distribution platform for that kind of structure. And so Audio Brary is also able to provide that for the book that I wrote. And they were two very separate ideas until suddenly they weren't. And then this part of this whole last year has been writing the book and setting up the company and
So in the last,
both.
we have 45 seconds.
Yep.
Tell us where, if
can do
they
this.
want to find out about Audio Brary, where do they go?
Go to
How do they-
audiobrary.com. It's that simple, audiobrary.com. Casanova, the first episode is actually going to drop on Valentine's Day, and pre-orders are up on the website right now. And you can also just download the app, and I have a little audio piece about why I created Audio Brary in there. And we're trying to move the needle a little bit in this industry.
So thank you.
Thank you.
You're wonderful.
Thank you.
Go buy the book. Find out what happens with the romance. Thank you very much.
Thank you.